Hi guys.
Hi, I'm Monique Hennings from Woodson, Tennessee.
My name is Dawson Grimmels, and I come from Huntington, Tennessee.
My name is Samarius Kirk. I live in Newbern, Tennessee.
My name is Ty Myers. I am from Bristol, Tennessee.
My name is Luciano Donati. I go to National State Community College.
I currently go to CCAT at Dixon.
And I go to school at Southwest Tennessee Community College.
I go to Columbia State Community College.
I go to Jackson State in Jackson.
I go to the University of Tennessee at Martin.
And I attend the incredible UT Chattanooga.
I am a first-generation college student attending Emory University.
And I am a first-generation college student.
I wanted to go to college, honestly, because I wanted to better myself.
Immense opportunities that would open up once I get my bachelor's degree.
To become a physical therapist assistant.
To be able to start a better life for my family.
High school didn't give me all the necessary tools that I needed to go out and, join the workforce.
And college was the best route for me to go and educate myself, become a better human, become a better friend, become a better community member.
College means a lot to me.
College means everything to me.
College means discovery to me.
Dedication to me.
Hard work and complexity.
College means adventure to me.
It pushes me to challenge my limitations.
College means that I get to pursue the career that I want to.
There's a lot of challenges that get thrown in your way, obstacles that you have to jump, or just obstacles you have to get through.
Procrastination was my weak link.
We went to virtual. I didn't have a laptop nor a printer, and I needed those for my last semester that I had. And I went ahead and talked to my success coach. He was able to help me out with getting a printer and a laptop, which was amazing because without him and without their support, I wasn't going to be able to get a good grade in those classes at all.
Have I faced any challenges? Yes. The counselors at Jackson State are very, very helpful when you need help and you need someone to talk to. Like, I've talked to one or two before, and they have helped me overcome a lot because I've gotten to the point where I've almost given up, but I haven't though. I almost did, and they helped me stay encouraged.
Most importantly, I'd like to thank Tennessee Promise, the Tennessee Achieves.
I would love to thank my college counselor, Dr. Marshall with the Ayers Foundation. She helped me so much during the application process and in transitioning into college. I really wouldn't be able to be here without her.
Really, the Niswonger Scholars Program. They've built up a incredible program that has allowed me to have an awesome infrastructure to lean on.
The biggest help that I've had during my college journey has been the Student Success Center at National State.
So I look forward to this journey of college. I hope to succeed in what I want to do. I'm in love with college.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Today's score is pleased to release Going Higher, our new report outlining recommendations for increasing post-secondary completion and student success in Tennessee. As many of you know, SCORE expanded our mission in 2019 to include a new focus on post-secondary education after a decade of work supporting educators and our state's policymakers in preparing K-12 students for college and career success. While Tennessee has enjoyed great progress in raising expectations and student achievement in K-12 education, and have led the nation in putting in place some initiatives to boost post-secondary access, there's clearly much more work to be done. We continue to see a gap in ensuring the successful transition, persistence, and eventual degree completion for too many of Tennessee's high school graduates as they move into our community college and technical colleges, as well as our four-year colleges and universities. This is true for every student group. And most concerning, among the students who are economically disadvantaged, just 1 in 10 of Tennessee's high school freshmen will successfully go on to complete a post-secondary credential within 6 years of enrolling. All of this was before the pandemic, which we know has created even more challenges for families and students. So despite the incredible progress our state has made since the Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010 and the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Act of 2014 to boost college access and to incentivize college completion, Tennessee students are still not doing as well as students in the rest of the nation in earning degrees and credentials. Yet at the same time, almost all living wage jobs, both today and tomorrow, require some sort of post-secondary credential. So we know we must do more to help students complete their degrees and put in place true career pathways that match our state's workforce and economic needs. In our Going Higher report and in today's session, we'll do a deep dive into many of the opportunities and challenges we see. And we're fortunate to have some outstanding leaders joining us to add to the discussion. First, observations and what I know will be a terrific conversation between Jamie Woodson and Randy Boyd. Jamie, as you know, is SCORE's immediate past CEO, a former state senator and Senate Education Chair, a UT board member, and an expert strategist around these issues. Randy, in addition to being a very successful business leader, is the president of the University of Tennessee, the founder of Tennessee Achieves, and the architect of the state's Drive to 55 initiative, including the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Program. He's truly dedicated himself to seeing more Tennessee students succeed. Then Samantha Gooder, SCORE's Senior Director of Post-Secondary Impact, will share an overview of our recommendations in the report. Then our good friend Dr. Nancy Dishner from the Niswonger Foundation in Greenville will moderate a terrific panel discussion on the issues raised in the report, featuring Dr. Tracy Hall, President of Southwest Tennessee Community College in Memphis, Dr. J.D. Hickey, a SCORE board member and President of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, Dr. Danette Howard, Senior Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the Lumina Foundation, and Dr. Tim Rennick, who has led some amazing work as Executive Director for the National Institute for Student Success at Georgia State University in Atlanta. Finally, we'll hear important messages from our Governor, Bill Lee, and SCORE's founder and chairman, Senator Bill Frist, before Dr. Russ Wigginton, SCORE's Chief Post-Secondary Impact Officer, closes out with some concluding thoughts. We've got lots of ground to cover, so let's get to it. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for your continued leadership and all you do to support the students of Tennessee.
Hi, I'm Randy Boyd, and I'm joined here with my close friend and now boss, Jamie Woodson. We are here to talk about some of the future of higher education and some of the past successes in the state of Tennessee, and we have a lot of those. So thrilled to have Jamie with me. It's always great to be with her and share conversations around education because we're both so passionate about it.
Obviously, we go back a long way, and we've worked together in supporting our great state for many, many years. And I cannot imagine a better person to have a conversation with than you today, because with SCORE releasing this landmark report and for us to have a chance to just reflect on Tennessee's incredible journey in higher education, I think it's just really fantastic. I'm very excited about it. And I think your leadership specifically has been tremendous.
So in full disclosure to our audience, I just found out that we only have 15 minutes. So we're going to jump right in. So a lot of people would say around 2010 was the pivotal point when things changed for the state of Tennessee. But there was a lot of things that happened before that created the foundation. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those things that created the crisis to take action.
Sure. Well, the early 2000s gave us a lot of information about what we were doing right and about what we could do to improve. And so I'll just highlight three that come top of mind for me, Randy. The first was our education lottery scholarships. The second was a growing employment and education gap. And the third was just the clear truth that we needed to face that we had a problem with completion. So I'll unpack that just a little bit. On our education lottery scholarships, Governor Bredesen and legislative leadership worked tirelessly to pass a suite of scholarships. We know them well today, right? The Hope Lottery Scholarship and the Wilder-Nafee Technical Skills Grants were part of that suite of reforms to put a stake in the ground on affordability for post-secondary education. So that was an important leadership move as early as 2003. Then we started to get more information. So we looked to education and employment gap. In the early 2000s, we had a brief recession, as you'll recall. And while it was brief, it began to show us a real challenge and a gap that emerged. And the gap was an employment and education gap. If you had a college education, you are more likely to be employed, to stay employed, or to regain employment. If you didn't, your chances were not as high. And so that was a real truth tell for our state. And then you get later in the decade, and I would just point out by 2009, while we were very happy and remain happy with the work that has taken place on affordability with the lottery scholarships, it was very clear that we still had a completion problem. Our goal isn't just to get students in the door to higher education, but to ensure that students are successful, they complete, and they're actually prepared for economic independence and economic success.
So tell me about a couple of the major initiatives back in during your watch where we launched us on this path that we're on now.
I'll boil it down into two big ones. In 2010, we're fresh off a special session right now. In 2010, we were fresh off of a special session that covered two important areas, one in K-12 and one in higher education. The first to the top suite of legislation was a suite of reforms that did a few really important things for Tennessee. Number one, it established us, Randy, as a leader in K-12 policy, a leader in the country, and folks were watching us to see what would happen. It also put us in a position to yield over $500 million of Tennesseans' hard-earned tax dollars returned to us to advance those reforms in federal tax dollars. That was a win. It also resulted in a lot more personal and private investment in our state to advance the implementation of that work. But the most important thing that did, it yielded a window in Tennessee history where in K-12, our students were the fastest improving in the nation. So we actually saw historic outcomes from that suite of policy. Then you flash into that was what passed in week one in a General Assembly specialist session. We go into the second week of that, recognizing we have an education and employment gap, we have a completion problem, and so that week was focused squarely on the Complete College Tennessee Act and addressing this important issue of completion. And I want to just highlight, there were a lot of pieces of that legislation that were important, but I think for our audience, three that come to mind to me that kind of rise up to the top. Number one, in terms of the suite of reforms that I would highlight, would be the outcomes-based funding formula. Game changer for how higher education operates. Instead of, which is important, enrollment is important, but instead of exclusively or almost exclusively focusing on how many students are coming into the door, Tennessee took a moment to say, we value access. We also value completion. And so the outcomes-based funding formula said, we're going to prioritize not just getting in the door, but completion and success because we want to position students for economic prosperity. So that would be number one. The second, and I think was a really important one, was the creation of Tennessee transfer pathways, right? So guaranteed credit transfer for students who actually complete a certain suite of courses or a course. We know that transfer is common, and we also know it's very common to lose important credits, which is a barrier to completion and a barrier for student success. So that was an important piece. And third, and I think importantly, was just an all-call, comprehensive, unified community college system. We learned a whole lot of good things and still learn a lot from our technical colleges. Cohort-based education where you have block scheduling and you really focus on how to move a student through and support that student to completion. That was also an important part of the CCTA that I would at least want to highlight for this conversation.
Well, you did a lot in those early years and set the foundation for everything that came afterwards.
Well, thank you. And that work just continued. So now this is when I get to flip the tables on you a little bit. You go from interviewer to interviewee. So I think this is where you come in, Randy. So obviously you were a key architect in the Tennessee Promise, an important piece of legislation that ultimately resulted in an initiative that we know very well today. It's a nationally renowned, nationally recognized last dollar scholarship program for our community and technical college students. Really important suite of reforms, right? So how did the Tennessee Promise build on the Complete College Tennessee Act And then how we know the Tennessee Promise today, but how did it become the Tennessee Promise that we know?
Well, those are two very big questions. I'm going to try to be very succinct about it. So it was an overnight success that took 10 years. We started in 2007 with a little idea called Knox Achieves, the same young people. It's a technical community college, free of charge in Knox County, with a match with a mentor, which turns out, it's another longer story, but turns out to be the most important part of the program. Because as you said, it's not about getting them into college, it's about getting them out with a degree. And so we got to make sure that they're successful. And we required them to do some community service. I'll fast forward and just say, last year we celebrated 100,000 students going into college as a result of that little program we started.
Awesome.
And 2.9 million community service hours, 70,000 mentors have been trained. So you've got now 70,000 people that understand how important college access is and how important it is to support young people. But that was the idea. In 2013, Governor Haslam, wanting to continue the success that you had already started and to build on the initiatives that had been started, some of which under Governor Bredesen, asked me to come and be a special advisor on higher education. I found anytime you take on a new role, the first thing you do is go around and ask people questions. Travel all across the state, talk to at least 100 people in higher education and ask them, what would you like to do? What big ideas do you have to change and improve higher education? I got 100 and more. I actually had a spreadsheet of all these good ideas. Here's the problem. It's hard to determine a good idea from a great idea if you don't know where you're going. The difference in a good idea and a great idea, the great idea takes you further and faster towards your goal. But if you don't have a goal, they're all the same. So when in search of a goal, remember talking to a lot of people about, well, what's the mission of higher education in the state of Tennessee? And nobody could articulate one until finally, Rich Rhoda, who was the executive director of THEC, said, oh, Randy, we've got a goal. It's in our 5-year plan. And in it, it says our goal is to have 42% post-secondary attainment by the year 2025. I thought, wow, that's perfect. We have a target, we have a date. This is perfect. How did you come up with 42%? I said, well, today we're at 32%. If we're on our current trajectory, by 2025, we'll be at 39%. Well, that makes sense, but now why did you pick 42%? Says, well, by the year 2025, we estimate that 42% will be the national average. Okay, so our big, hairy, audacious goal for our state is to be average in 13 years. He says, yeah, we're going to be average. I don't know, that doesn't really sound very exciting, but where should we be? Well, by every workforce study, by the year 2025, we have to be at 55%. And so that's how the drive to 55 came about. If we have to be at 55%, we have no other choice than to make that our goal. We came up with 5 strategies, some of which you've already touched on, but get them ready. Our students have to be prepared to be able to have post-secondary success. I get them in. How do we get them in? The Tennessee Promise was a natural extension of the Tennessee Achieves model. We already had a model. We were already sending 51% of the students to college. I had to give a shout out to Steve Cohen. He's now a good friend of mine. He wasn't really a big fan of Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise when we came out with it. But I got the opportunity to thank him a year ago and say, the whole foundation was built on taking excess money from the lottery. If that lottery hadn't been created, the Tennessee Promise wouldn't have been created. So we owe both the Hope Scholarship and the Tennessee Promise to Steve and all the people that helped create that lottery scholarship. The third strategy was completion. It doesn't do any good to get in if we don't get them out. And you already hit on several of the key things that are really important. Started something called Complete Tennessee to help continue that work, which then later merged into SCORE, which is a great place and a great partnership. We talked about the fourth strategy was finish what you start. There's so many people across the state of Tennessee that went to college, have some college, but dropped out. How do we get them back in to finish and get some kind of credential? And then finally, accountability and alignment is not about 55% of anything. It's 55% of the certificates and degrees that the workforce needs. So making sure we're aligned and making sure that we're putting all this effort into the most useful and impactful way.
That's great. So a lot of work has taken place over the last decade, particularly in this area. We think about the Complete College Tennessee Act and how it really charted a path forward. Tennessee Promise comes in, accelerates that, and is groundbreaking in terms of access. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the greatest impact that you see from the Tennessee Promise.
Our biggest barrier to accomplishing our dreams, to accomplishing our future, the things we need to do is our culture, a culture of low expectations. All across the state, people don't believe that college is for them. that post-secondary education is for them, a better life is for them. It's sad, but it's true. I remember Chrissy Delahondra, our executive director of Tennessee Achieves, early on going to some rural county in the Upper Cumberland and meeting with the superintendent of schools. And the superintendent said, yeah, this idea is really not for us. People around here, we don't go to college. You've got to believe that this is in your future before you can actually attain it. The great part about the Tennessee Promise is that it now makes it possible for everybody to go to college. We didn't just create something that comes out of the operating funds. There was an endowment over $400 million. So we can actually make a promise to every single kindergartner and their parent they can go to college, so they can start dreaming bigger at an earlier age. So I think creating that new culture of higher expectations is the most important part that we were able to do. Yeah, the creating the mentors, the 2.9 million service hours, all those things were important, but changing our culture was probably the most important part. On CCTA, what would you have done differently, and what can we do now going forward in the future?
Yeah, so I think first, to your point on culture change, I think when I think of the Complete College Tennessee Act, like so many important reforms, as you mentioned with Tennessee Promise, as we talked about earlier with the CCTA, but if I'm going to put one up and above all of the rest, it'd have to be the outcomes-based funding formula. When I think about whether it's the state budget, an education budget, a family budget, how we spend our resource is a reflection of our values, and what policies are in place reflect our values in terms of funding formulas. And we valued access and continue to value access, and we have added an important value, and that value is completion. And so to have an outcomes-based model to say it's important to us as a state that students come, they are supported, they complete, and they're able to move on successfully. I think that value statement was really important. And I know that from my experience over the last decade, it just changed the way college campuses think about the work, right? From the president's suite and the executive staff to the student affairs office. How do we support students? How do we make sure that they are successful in their path to completion? So I think it was a real game changer. And I think as we look to the future, I would just say, goodness, what an incredible decade it's been. And Tennessee's established itself as a leader time and time again, not only in education, but in higher education, which is significant. And it also reminds me that the work is unfinished. We still have so much work to do.
For us to be successful, it's not always about invention. It's more about discovery and scale. There are people that are doing good things already across our state. Find the things that are working and then scale them up. One example, we had a great benefactor that gave Tennessee Achieves a lot of funds to create supports for students just in Knox County. And we're testing a lot of different things to help improve college going rate and completion. One of which was completion grants, small grants to help fix a radiator when the car goes out, or just small emergency funds, anywhere from $50 to $500, but usually it's in the very small range. And we've been experimenting with this program for the last year. Our fall to fall retention rate at our community college in Knox County as a result of this, with the people that have got the completion grants, the fall to fall retention rate is 78% versus the rest of the students at 65%. So just finding examples like that, 13% jump just with these small completion grants. We need to continue to test and pilot things like this. And once we find one that works, find ways to scale it.
I love it.
Thank you, Jamie, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Sam from SCORE. It's my pleasure to share with you today some of the background as well as specific recommendations SCORE has developed for increasing post-secondary completion and student success in Tennessee. As we know, Tennessee has been a leader in higher education policy, innovation, and implementation for more than a decade. Through the Complete College Tennessee Act of 2010, we centered the state around a system focused on completion, with a new outcomes-based funding formula focused on student success. Then, with the Tennessee Promise Scholarship Act of 2014, state leaders again changed the college-going conversation when Tennessee became the first state in the nation to offer high school graduates 2 years of community or technical college tuition free. In this report, we took a step back to review and evaluate how well these reforms are working and what else needs to be done to support students. We heard directly from state policy leaders, our institutions of higher education, national experts, and directly from students to better understand how to accelerate and build on the work for the next decade. What we found is that while these policy foundations have been instrumental to the progress we've made to date in increasing post-secondary attainment overall, we must acknowledge and work to close the major gaps in equity among students of color and students from low-income backgrounds specifically that we see in post-secondary completion rates. Now more than ever, as we struggle through the current recession and pandemic, the economic benefits of a post-secondary credential are clear. And there's much more to do if we are to give all of our students the opportunities they need and deserve in today's economy. To that end, several themes rang clear in our listening tour. Institutional leadership is important and can make all the difference in the lives of students. We need to use data to develop proactive interventions and solutions to help more students persist and complete college. We need to work even harder at aligning degrees and credentials with local and regional workforce needs. And we must make strategic investments in urgently addressing attainment gaps and ensuring equitable opportunities for all students. To address these challenges, SCORE's recommendations zero in on 5 overarching objectives. The first, focus on student equity in goal setting, reporting, and data transparency. To articulate and embrace statewide goals to double post-secondary completion rates for Black, Hispanic, and lower-income Pell-eligible students by 2028, and to close all completion gaps by 2035. To create individualized system and institution-wide completion plans on how to achieve those goals. To incentivize this work by adding a focused population premium in the outcomes-based funding formula. And to be completely transparent in public reporting on our progress to increase equity. Next, align Tennessee's post-secondary system to future workforce needs. By developing a statewide strategic plan that prioritizes high-demand, high-quality credentials. By creating and tapping into employer-led advisory councils to identify and better align with regional workforce needs. By creating a new Governor's Certificate for Future Readiness that recognizes regions and best practices in aligning our education and workforce systems. And by creating data dashboards that present a clear picture of where we are and where the gaps are in preparing our workforce for the future. Number 3, reinvent credential delivery. By encouraging the state to launch a competency-based network using state funding or COVID recovery funding to develop more shared programs of study in high-demand fields with flexible entry and exit points that lead to more credentials that meet workforce needs. And by renewing the Complete College Tennessee Act's commitment to establish a more unified and comprehensive community college system. With that, we call on our community college system to develop a common application process for all of the community colleges to use with a one-click registration process for students to choose their programs of study. Number 4, increase student success with the Tennessee transfer pathways. With Tennessee Promise students receiving additional financial aid when using a Tennessee transfer pathway. And high school and college advising staff receiving additional training to assist students in finding their way along the transfer pathways. With our state evaluating the effectiveness of the transfer pathways to better understand and act on the barriers and opportunities. Finally, we must maintain our momentum on student success by creating an overarching, coordinated initiative that supports student success with evidence-based programs, including grants for non-tuition supports, school counseling and advising, cohort-based learning, and responsive data systems tied to intervention strategies. We should allow Tennessee Promise students to take part-time courses during the summer term without counting toward the current program limits. We need regular reviews to ensure our colleges are complying with the Complete College Tennessee Act. And we need to invest in better and more college and career advising models that are proving to boost college access, retention, completion, and success. We hope that you will review the report in full and we hope you will continue to work with us as we collectively refine and build upon all we've heard and what we are recommending in supporting this vital work. And now to help us explore many of these topics even further, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Nancy Dishner and an incredible panel of leaders who are deeply committed to increasing opportunity for students. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Nancy Dishner, and I am honored to be assisting this distinguished panel of experts as SCORE releases the Going Higher report. As president and CEO of the Niswonger Foundation, an educational foundation in Northeast Tennessee, and as a commissioner on the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, I see firsthand the importance of our state focusing on post-secondary attainment. Importantly, we must address the gaps in attainment across racial, socioeconomic, and geographic lines to improve the opportunities for all students to succeed by setting standard goals that are centered on equity, increasing supports for students, and aligning to workforce demands. I am delighted to be joined by this panel today. Dr. Tracy Hall, Southwest Tennessee Community College, Dr. J.D. Hickey, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, Dr. Danette Howard from the Lumina Foundation, and Dr. Tim Rennick from Georgia State University. Welcome to our panelists, and let's get started with the conversation. Dr. Hall, you lead Southwest Tennessee Community College, an open access institution in Memphis that serves a diverse student body. Could you share about the mission of an open access institution and what are some of the most pressing challenges that students face throughout their experiences in higher education that can keep them from completing post-secondary credential or degree?
Yes, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to participate on the panel. It is an honor to do so and to share the work that we are doing at Southwest Tennessee Community College. The mission of the community college is we're open access, as you mentioned, which means that we have students from all backgrounds and all levels of academic preparation. And that can present a challenge. That can present a challenge in terms of the level of services and the types of services, because we have to be everything to all people. What we do, though, is we focus on what our students bring to us. And we have done a lot of work to make sure that they have all of the success measures in place, from academic support to student wraparound services. We look at our students as at promise. So often we talk about students, especially from an urban community college, as at risk, and we don't look at their deficits. So our equity work has caused us to really pay attention to what they bring to us, because we know that our students have that resiliency. They have so many things that they face in their lives. Life happens to them. And when we are in a pandemic, it is really just a slap in the face to many of our students based on what they already are experiencing. Childcare issues. Some of our students experience homelessness, experience food insecurity. So at a open access college and open access urban community college, we have to address all of those aspects of our students' lives. We have to take a holistic approach to making sure our students are successful. We cannot just say it's only about the classroom. Just focus on your work in the classroom, because if you don't have lights, you can't study. If you don't have childcare, then that also impacts your education. If you have transportation issues. So we have to be open to, and we have to be wraparound support services. We have to look at our students in a holistic manner. And so that's the mission of any open access college. And that's what we do.
And that is a great segue to a question for Dr. Hickey. From your perspective as a major employer, what does the future alignment need to look like between workforce and education so that all students can reach their full potential?
Thank you, Dr. Dishner. We're glad to grateful for the opportunity to share our perspective. So we're like a lot of companies. Over the past decade, we've become a data science company. It's how we add value to our members. It's how we differentiate ourselves from competitors. And increasingly, it's who we hire. So we've got over 1,000 IS professionals, mainly software developers and cybersecurity experts. Any given time, we've got 100 to 150 open IS positions, starting salaries in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. These are good jobs. And I think it would be an understatement to say that we are not getting the quality or the quantity of graduates from our Tennessee post-secondary institutions that we need. So some of that is just tactical. We have trouble finding graduates who are trained in the languages and the platforms that we use. But more problematically, we have trouble finding IS students who are just accustomed to learning in a collaborative applied learning environment. And so over time, a couple things have happened for us. And if you look at our sort of adaptation to that, first of all, we increasingly outsource and offshore those entry-level software development jobs. We view that as deeply problematic for a number of reasons, but we don't do it for wage arbitrage. We do it because we have trouble finding the talent. The other one, which is sort of its own interesting case study in its own right, is our IS team has developed their own 18-month curriculum to try to upskill new hires and make them productive. And probably no surprise, the core of that is we physically embed these new graduates in a more experienced team so they can learn side by side. If I had to put my finger on the root causes, the things that we have to address, part of that is just we have a glaring lack of communication and a lack of data sharing that's going on between large employers and the post-secondary schools. If you think about it, faculty leads, department chairs, chancellors, they ought to have direct line of sight into the hiring needs for the local, regional, large employers who we're hiring right now, where we see that market going tomorrow. At the same time, our HR leads, our ops leads, they ought to be providing what I think about as sort of the NPS score, right, on how are those graduates doing 4 or 5 years post-graduation, and how do we see their products relative to some of the other schools that we are hiring from. That information is readily available, and I've got to believe it could be transformative if we were better sharing it and better using it. The other thing I would say, and I'll be frank, we've been leaning into this space for a couple of years now. I think there's a lack of incentive back into the post-secondary system. So as a business leader, we get it, right? It is hard to tear down your production line and rebuild it as the market changes. I think I've got a ton of new respect for all the unique challenges that schools have, accreditation bodies that I've never heard of, faculty committees and the like. And I will give our Tennessee governors a lot of credit for introducing the incentive into the funding mechanism for graduating students. But to my knowledge, there is no incentive for how those graduates are actually performing in the real world. And I listen, we met a ton of really great and passionate reform leaders over the last couple of years, but I haven't met many Tennessee school leaders who are genuinely concerned about losing their jobs if their graduates are chronically failing out there in the marketplace. That is not a feedback loop that exists, and I think the system underperforms as a result.
Now to dig a little deeper about the possibilities for our state, let's hear from Dr. Howard. In Tennessee, many institutions are already starting to think about their own equity goals, and we have an overall statewide attainment goal of 55% of our adult population having a degree or a credential by the year 2025. What is the value of also setting a statewide attainment goal with a focus on equity?
Thank you so much for that question, Nancy. And also, I really just appreciate the opportunity to be here today with all the fellow panelists. So I want to start just by acknowledging some of the good work that has happened in Tennessee. Tennessee was one of the first states to set an overall attainment goal. And that work to increase the number of degrees and high quality credentials has been propelled by the Drive to 55 and also the Complete College Tennessee Act, which really served as a model for other states across the nation. And when you look at the overall attainment rate for the last 10 years, you see significant improvement in terms of the number of bachelor's and associate degrees and high quality certificates that have been obtained by Tennesseans, increasing from about 31% back in 2008 to 45% in 2018, which is the most recent data that we have available. So those are the overall numbers. But when you look underneath the overall numbers and begin to disaggregate the data by race and ethnicity, you see really huge and, quite frankly, unacceptable, unfair, and unjust differences in attainment outcomes. So, for example, in Tennessee, degree attainment, so this is associate and bachelor's degrees, degree attainment for the white population is 37%. For Black Tennesseans, that's 27%. For Hispanic Latino, that's only 20%. And so I think we would all agree that those differences in outcomes, as I said, are really unacceptable. And the reason that equity-specific goals are actually necessary is that you tend to make progress on the things that you pay attention to and measure. And so the state has made great progress on the overall attainment goal, but now it's time for the state to dig a little deeper, to set some equity-specific goals, and to also then develop specific strategies for meeting those goals for the equity population. Because I think that we would not be happy, the state of Tennessee and its residents would not be pleased if you met your 55% attainment goal, but actually increased inequities by different groups. And so that's why it's really important at this point to think about equity-focused goals that would best serve your equity populations.
Excellent thoughts. Thank you. And to build on that, I would love to hear from Dr. Rennick. At Georgia State University's data-driven approach to leveling the playing field for students from all backgrounds has made that university a national leader in student success initiatives. Please describe some of those key efforts implemented during your time as a senior leader at Georgia State that are distinct in helping to build that record of success.
Yeah, I want to echo what Dr. Howard just said, that it's really important to make a commitment about equity. And Georgia State did that a decade ago. We made our #1 goal in our strategic plan as a university to improve success rates and eliminate equity gaps. And we've had 6 years in a row now in which our Black, our Hispanic, and our Pell students have graduated at or above the rate of the student body overall. So at Georgia State, it's no longer a predictor of whether you're going to graduate or more likely to graduate, whether you're one race or one income level and so forth. So this is doable, but it does take a commitment. I think the good news is the commitment that needs to be made is a intuitive one that doesn't take a lot of guesswork. We've known in higher education for really decades and centuries that students respond to personalized attention. The problem at places like Georgia State or places like Southwest Tennessee Community College historically is that we haven't had the resources to have faculty and staff to be as attentive as at the elite liberal arts institutions where they have really low student to faculty and staff ratios. What we've done at Georgia State over the last decade is level the playing field by delivering personalized attention at scale. And that's the simplest way of explaining what we've done. We've leveraged technology, big data, increasingly AI, to be able to support our students, not occasionally, not when they drop in once every 6 months, but on a day-to-day basis. We're tracking every Georgia State student every single day for 800 different data-based risk factors. So if they go off path, we know immediately and can reach out with help. We're using an AI-enhanced chatbot to communicate with students, to give them not only nudges and support, but also to hear what's happening with them and receive their questions immediately. We launched that chatbot back in 2016. In the first 3 months of use, we had over 180,000 questions answered to our students by this platform. we're using analytics to distribute institutional aid. Instead of just saying everybody gets this type of grant, we're saying where are the needs of the students, which students are struggling financially, and reaching out proactively to those students. And we've totally changed the way we do advising at Georgia State. These kind of systematic changes, not just for the Black students or just for the low-income students, but for all Georgia State students, have raised the graduation rates for our whole student body. But they've disproportionately benefited students who, because of a lack of information and support in the past, students coming from first generation and low-income families, lack this kind of support. Those students have benefited and improved the most. And that's why we've been able to eliminate equity gaps. And I'll add one last comment that, you know, some people have said, yeah, it worked at Georgia State, will it work elsewhere? Well, a little over 5 years ago, the state of Georgia consolidated us with the largest community college in Georgia because it was underperforming, Georgia Perimeter College. We didn't raise the graduation rates, we didn't raise the admission standards. It's still an open access campus. We didn't raise the tuition at all, but we tripled the graduation rates in less than 5 years. And when consolidation with Perimeter College was announced, white students were graduating at 2.5 times the rate of Black students. This year, this fall at Perimeter College, Black students, white students, Hispanic students, and Pell students are all graduating at the same rates. These are very doable things. It takes a systematic approach.
And among those many wonderful elements, I definitely heard the one about advising, Dr. Rennick. What do you see as the critical features of a proactive advising model that address student needs and ensure that they're going to make it to graduation?
Yeah, what we found when we looked at our advising data is that the students who access data by their own volition were in many cases not the students who most needed academic advising. Our honors students would come to the advising office and sit down and talk to their advisors on a regular basis. And we would reach out proactively to students who were really struggling because there were federal requirements. For instance, students who were no longer eligible for financial aid had to sit down with an advisor before they could become eligible again. What we changed about 10 years ago was from a passive model of advising where we waited predominantly for the students to come to us to a proactive model. We look at the student's pathway to graduation. Every student has a map that semester by semester, these are the courses you need to take and pass in order to graduate in the minimum amount of time. And we track those maps every semester, every day. We're looking to see if students are on path. We're looking at their registration records. If they register for the wrong class, we're not waiting 2 months until the middle of the semester to catch on to the fact that they signed up for the wrong class. We're intervening immediately and getting them into the right class before the semester begins. If the semester begins and a student's not logging on to their classes and it's online, or if they're taking a quiz and not performing well, we're not waiting for the midterm or the end of the semester to reach out to that student. We're reaching out within 24 hours. 10 years ago, we had about 20,000 meetings between advisors and students every year at Georgia State, and about 80% of those were initiated by the student. This past year, we had just under 100,000 meetings between students and advisors, and almost 80% of those meetings were initiated by the advisors because they saw something that was amiss. They saw a problem and they saw an issue and reached out before it became exacerbated, before it led to the student dropping or flunking out. And that's the secret to good advising, is proactive. The students who benefit the most will be the students who in the past were sitting in the middle and not accessing these kind of resources at scale.
And with that emphasis on data-driven approaches on campuses, I'd like to turn back to Dr. Hall. Dr. Hall, Southwest is using data to improve student support services, no doubt. Tell us about the Achieving the Dream program and how it's helping students to succeed in college.
Yes, well, we are joined Achieving the Dream in 2016, and I'd like to kind of tie in my comments to Dr. Rennick. Several years ago, I took a team to Georgia State to see the marvelous work that's happening at Georgia State, and what he is saying is absolutely correct. It's about resources. It's about the allocation or reallocation of resources. And so what we did is modeled our Achieving the Dream work really based on what's happening at Georgia State. So we undertook a redesign, reinvent, reset the student experience at Southwest. When I arrived, we had a 7-year decline in enrollment. We were the lowest in the state in terms of graduation rates, and the gaps between minority students, Black students, and white students was huge. We are the only community college that is majority minority. The majority of our students are Black. And so if these students aren't being successful, the college is not successful. Our faculty work very hard, but when you talk about the equity gaps, when your students come to you and they have not had the same resources as some other students, there are those gaps that you have to fill in. And if you don't have the resources, then that can be a challenge. And so we had to redesign our experiences, the whole student experience, to see where can we get the most, maximize our resources. And the Georgia State model of the professional advisors, that was perfect for us. We moved away from faculty advising that had its share of challenges, let me say, to a professional advising model. We have a triage approach for our students. And so when they are enrolling, they have enrollment specialists, financial aid specialists, and a professional advisor. And these folks wrap their arms around the students and help hold their hands as much or as little as they need as they matriculate through the college. And so that's where our focus has really been, on that support to get students in and to be successful. We moved into the classroom because that's really critical. What's happening in the classroom, about 80 or more % of the time students spend on campus is with the faculty. And so we've disaggregated the data in our 20 most high enrolled courses and saw that there were gaps between Black student achievement and white student achievement. And so we've developed a Gateway Faculty Fellows program that's looking at redesigning the material, the curriculum, looking at the courses and making it more culturally relevant. And so we really are doing a lot to make sure our students are successful. All now of the 40 technical and community colleges in Tennessee are part of Achieving the Dream. The Tennessee Board of Regents has a graduate warranty in place in terms of making sure that if our students graduate and they are not ready for the workforce, that we bring them back and we will retrain them if employers let us know that they have become dissatisfied with any of our graduates. So we are working hard, not only at Southwest, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our workforce, but we're working hard across the entire state. And I think that's evident with our work at Achieving the Dream. We are one college of 40, but we're all working hard to make sure our students are successful.
And with those excellent examples, I would like to turn back to Dr. Howard. In your view, why is it important for data at the state level to be disaggregated by student groups, and how can it best show progress from year to year?
So I think I'd like to build upon some of the comments that have just been made by both Dr. Hall and Dr. Rennick. One of the reasons that it's important to disaggregate the data is that you have to have a sense of your current baseline. You have to know where you are relative to outcomes in order to set a realistic goal for where you'd like to be. So a very interesting data point that I came across as I was preparing for this panel is that there was a 4-year period of time where overall completion of bachelor's and associate degrees in Tennessee increased by 7 percentage points. That is admirable. However, when you disaggregate the data, you see that there were no noticeable increases at all for Black or Latino students. You would not be aware of that uneven outcome if the data were not disaggregated. Importantly, I also found that of the 50 states, Tennessee ranks 45th in terms of closing equity gaps in degree attainment at public institutions. And so Tennessee is on the right path in terms of having all of the important policy building blocks in place. But I think that we want to make sure that Tennessee is on a trajectory toward the drive to 55, not just for some, but for all. And for that reason, disaggregation of the data is incredibly important. And what I love about the model of Georgia State is that they exemplify for all of us what's possible. For some, kind of closing those equity gaps seems like an intractable problem. They are quite large and significant. But with focus, with targeted strategies, and with data-informed decision-making and policy-making, we know that it's possible. And the final reason that I think it's incredibly important to disaggregate the data is that there is not a one-size-fits-all model for the supports or interventions that are necessary for students. So we heard Dr. Rennick and Dr. Hall say that when you pull the data apart and you see uneven outcomes by student groups, you can then target and create nuanced supports and interventions for those individual students. And so those are all great reasons to disaggregate the data, to have very effective data dashboards, and then to revisit the data with significant frequency as you're implementing your strategy.
To close out our panel, Dr. Hickey, in thinking about how we increase opportunities for students from all backgrounds to meet their ultimate goals, we have to think about how we can better prepare students for the careers of tomorrow. What do you think needs to change when it comes to education, training, delivery for great jobs and burgeoning careers, especially during a global pandemic?
Thank you. Listen, this pandemic is a great opportunity for change. It's a great opportunity to do things differently. I used to tell our 10-care team 20 years ago during the Bredesen administration, the one thing we don't have to worry about is breaking anything, right? And when it's all said and done, I guarantee you we're going to look back and say we weren't sufficiently ambitious about it. The other panelists are the real experts here, but there's a ton of really exciting things on the workforce readiness reforms. Just a few of the things we're involved in. We've been talking to our local superintendent, some of the principals from our priority high schools, about what would it take to create sector-based career pathways starting in middle school using our Future Ready investments as an anchor. We have challenged our UTC colleagues here locally. What if every IS degree that they conferred came with a learning subscription? So their graduates could come back and learn new languages, new certificates. And by the way, that's something we would gladly pay for our UTC graduate hires. But our biggest bet by far is what we call our Blue Sky program. We are in the process of trying to create a new IS degree program to connect local underserved high school students with these high paying tech jobs. We've been at it for about 24 months. We've got a pending announcement that hopefully is going to come in the next couple of weeks with our university partner. But it started with a couple observations. One is 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 a highly learnable skill set. With the right exposure, with the right opportunity, a student from any background ought to be able to learn these skills and get these jobs and be successful in them. The other one was that if you approach IS post-secondary training from a work perspective and you tear down the old curriculum and build it back, we came to believe that we should be able to offer a 24-month bachelor degree in a work-based setting, by the way, at little or no cost to Pell-eligible students, with a guaranteed job on the back end and a stipend along the way to address a lot of those challenges that Dr. Hall pointed out at the beginning of the session. There are parts of this that reflect our values and our goal to be a good corporate citizen, in particular the part about drawing a majority of the students from local priority high schools. But I'll be honest, this is not a philanthropic effort for us. We're not running this through our corporate social responsibility team. We think this is a unique opportunity to keep ourselves competitive, stay independent by securing a local source of talent that's going woefully undertapped today. I would, on the pandemic, I would just close with a little bit of a warning. I think it's a great opportunity, but I also think it pretty dramatically increases the urgency for reform. In particular, as large employers are moving to a more highly distributed and remote workforce, which is pretty much every large employer that I know. I think it's going to stress the system even more. If I just sort of go across from the perspectives, if you think about new graduates and new hires, the onboarding and orientation process just got exponentially harder. I think there's a lot of us who are employers who are bragging on how well we did to this remote work transition. And the truth is it worked because our employees had existing networks that they could draw upon. And that's just not there, obviously, for new hires. From an employer perspective, if you think about our traditional method of upskilling new hires by physically embedding them with more experienced teammates, that obviously doesn't work if those more experienced teammates aren't sitting together physically. Can we adapt the model? Sure, but it's going to take some real effort. And then on the school perspective, listen, every large employer is now less dependent on their local institutions for sources of talent. Every CEO that I talk to is trying to take advantage of this new opportunity, this new flexibility by broadening where and how that they source new talent. And I'll be honest, if I woke up as a chancellor of a Tennessee post-secondary institution tomorrow, I would not be excited about competing with the Georgia States and the make schools of the world who've already recognized and have taken this turn. So I do think the pandemic increases the urgency.
We are so appreciative of this enlightening conversation. Thank you to all our expert panelists today for sharing your experiences and bringing a real-world perspective to the recommendations from the Going Higher report. Thank you for clearly setting the stage for the work ahead, and with this guidance, let's keep this moving forward. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Governor Bill Lee here. In Tennessee, we already have much to be proud of in supporting our students. We were the first in the nation to boost college access and affordability, and we've been a national leader in expanding the definition of college to include technical training. We've also worked hard to better align degrees and certificates earned after high school with the tangible job skills most needed in our state through the governor's investment in vocational education, because we know a high school diploma alone is not nearly enough to compete today. An industry credential, post-secondary certificate, or apprenticeship is critical in preparing the next generation for their future. We must do even more to get our students career ready, and improving post-secondary access and quality is a way to give all students opportunities for success. Today's Going Higher report outlines some specific ideas and policy proposals to help strengthen education in our state. I'd like to thank SCORE for their efforts in developing this report. Nothing will be more important to our students, our communities, and our workforce than making sure that we provide opportunities for quality education in Tennessee.
Thank you, Governor Lee, for your leadership and for your commitment to Tennessee's students. We look forward to working with you and supporting you and your team on these important issues. And thank you to everyone who has joined us and to all of those who have participated in today's outstanding presentations. Tennessee is fortunate to have a solid foundation of higher education policy already in place with the Complete College Tennessee Act and the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. Those groundbreaking policies focus the state on the issues of completion and access. Yet it's clear from the data that we as a state have much more work to do to ensure that every Tennessee student can both access and complete college. SCORE's Going Higher report outlines key recommendations to put more Tennessee students in the trajectory to earning the post-secondary degrees and credentials to help them succeed in their careers. We must align our post-secondary system to the future needs of our workforce. Governor Lee has already taken substantial steps calling for clear pathways and programs to address the real workforce needs in our economy. Now, we must put that vision into action. We must focus on student equity, setting some clear statewide equity goals, collecting and reporting the data we need, and being intentional with our supports to ensure that all students from all backgrounds have the opportunities and the support to actually complete their degrees. We must reimagine and reinvent what it means to successfully deliver credentials to students. Our colleges and universities should explore how we award credit to students based on the mastery and the competency required, and shift away from classroom seat time as the only determinant. And finally, we must all work together to end Tennessee's completion challenge. By funding and deploying proving, data-informed, and evidence-based student supports and interventions, like the ones we just heard from Georgia State, Southwest, and others, with hands-on completion coaches and advisors, learning cohorts, and even smoother and simpler credit transfer pathways among our colleges and universities. SCORE is committed to supporting and encouraging these needed reforms and working with our higher education partners on the front lines to put them into practice. But it's going to take us all working together to move the needle and to support all students. It's time to put these ideas into action, so please join us. By working together, I know Tennessee can go even higher in preparing all students for college, for career, and for life, and improving the economic opportunity and quality of life for all Tennesseans.
Thank you, Senator Frist, and thank you to the many outstanding panelists and presenters today. As SCORE's Chief Post-Secondary Impact Officer, and following a long career as a college administrator and educator, I know firsthand the deep commitment we all share for students and to student success. Thanks to your good work and dedication, Tennessee is well positioned to lead the nation in crafting and implementing the forward-thinking higher education policies that begin with the end in mind. And that is to help all of our students prepare for a lifetime of success by completing meaningful post-secondary degrees. But as we've heard today, and as the Going Higher report makes clear, to do this, we must become even more intentional, more data-driven, and even more student-focused. SCORE is committed to joining with our higher education partners to support this important work. Together, we will join you in making sure state policies and procedures are regularly reviewed and refined, and to reduce the financial barriers students face. We will work with you to identify the non-tuition supports students most need, and then pilot, scale, and share solutions all across the state. We will join with you in encouraging and launching more local partnerships between K-12, our post-secondary schools, and regional employers that benefit students in our local economies. And finally, but perhaps most importantly, we want to work with you to center equity in all that we do so that one's economic status, geographic location, or racial and ethnic status are no longer the predictors of credential or career attainment in our state. It is simply not enough to help some students succeed. We must come together to help all students succeed. The large college going and completion gaps we see with Black, Hispanic, and Pell eligible students are no longer acceptable. We must double down and zero in on closing those divides. In short, there is no time to waste. We can and will set higher expectations because today's status quo is simply not good enough. Build better supports for students because too many today are not achieving their college dreams. Too many students are falling short. We will make higher education a bridge to great careers because today too many lives and careers are going unfulfilled. And we will secure the economic future of Tennessee because today too many opportunities for our state are being missed. Today's higher education report identifies the challenges and offers numerous recommendations to address these challenges. But it will be up to us in the higher education community to find, embrace, and advance the solution. It is time to get to work. Thank you again for joining us and for working with us in the days and months ahead. We are grateful for the chance to partner with you. We stand adjourned.